Hey y'all, welcome to the Liberation is Lit podcast where the power of storytelling meets the force of social change. I'm your host, Taylor Simon, and in this podcast, we believe in the profound impact of stories. And I am so excited to be joined here with my friend on the other side of the podcast, Mike, Nicki Pappas, author, poet, actress, a bunch of things that we'll probably get into today. So, hey, Nikki, how are you today?
Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to be here.
Yes. So, to kick us off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to becoming a storyteller through writing and theater?
Yeah, how would I describe myself? And I'd say I'm a risk taker. Not that I necessarily enjoy taking risks, but that I have experienced the most growth and the biggest shifts in my timeline when I've taken risks. And two ways of that for me were the writing and the acting. And so, if I could just give a little background, I'd say that my life changed when I took the risk of leaving home for college, which might not seem like a big deal to people, but it was huge for me growing up in poverty in the rural South. Many of my friends never left, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it's like I never felt like I belonged there. And then I look back and I was like, oh, I was kind of always in this process of leaving. And then during college, I got connected to a kind of culty church. And I was there for 10 years. And that really became my family and the place that I spent a lot of my time. That was my circle of support. And it just got smaller and smaller as it became those people. And I hadn't cultivated relationships outside of the church, which is kind of a function of culty behavior, right? Is you want to keep everything in house. And we're a family. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when you're a dysfunctional family, that's where some problems can, right? And so it just started to get to a point where I couldn't even trust myself anymore. And that is where some of the breakdown starts to happen. And then I started reading about and learning about all these things that I had been taught one way about race first and then about gender. And I started being like, oh, well, the church, that I was going to, we say we're this welcoming place. But what that meant was, I mean, you have to believe the things we believe and show up the way we want you to show up. And so then I thought, I forever the optimist. It's like people just don't know. And if they know, then dot, dot, dot. So tried to have some conversations with the pastor, and that meeting resulted in me being directly spiritually abused when I tried to say, hey, here's some ways that the church could maybe change. And so then my life changed again when at the age of 29, I took the risk to leave church, to leave that church. And after being spiritually abused, and I realized that even though here I am, I'm about to lose my entire community, I'd rather be alone and free than, quote, doing life, as we would say, with people who think that it's God's good design for women to be submissive, for example, since that was one of the biggest things. So in leaving church, I gave myself permission to really start asking questions, lean into curiosity, and pursue my own passions because I didn't have an identity outside of who I was for the church. And so I've always loved to write. I look back and I found journals from when I was a kid and throughout my adolescence. And so I connected back in my 30s, started connecting back to writing, started writing poetry, short stories, other types of writing. And I would enter them into competitions. And I also started going to therapy. And the therapist that I was going to at the time was like, keep writing. This is helping you heal your story. So that's kind of how I got into the writing. And then in addition to that, I started podcasting. And in August 2020, I launched my previous podcast, Broadening the Narrative, where I would just interview guests who were broadening those narratives I was taught about race, gender, sexuality, the Bible, whatever from my previous religious context. And being a podcast host and having people value those conversations that I was having really helped boost my confidence because it was like, yeah, these are stories that, like, what you're doing, like, people have these stories and, like, let's be telling them. And so then I was like, okay, I feel more confident as I'm learning more about myself. And that led me to my first love, which was theater. Like, I love writing, but theater was my first love in the sense of I was never in productions as a kid. It was like the things that we did at church, so the Christmas pageant and all that. But I was like, your girl is Mary, okay? cast me as Mary if you want me to be happy. Do not make me just be an angel in the choir of angels. No, I meant to stand out, oh my gosh. And sidebar, I auditioned to be Sandy for Grease in high school. Didn't get it. I was just like backup dancer number 4. So I did like a few weeks, or I mean, a few days of rehearsal. And then I like dropped out because I was like, if I'm not Sandy, then I don't want to do it. And so didn't handle that the best. So with theater, though, getting back into theater, I saw that there were some auditions coming up for a local theater for a show. And I had done so much work on myself through therapy and other means that I was like, even if I don't get cast, I want to prove to myself that I can show up for myself in this way and put myself out there in this way and not take the rejection personally if I'm rejected. And I was cast as actress number 3. And that included over 10 characters and all these various vignettes. So it was quite the undertaking for a first performance. And I always joke that there were 6 characters and 6 of us showed up. So by default, I got cast, but I didn't care. And the director says, no, I could have called in more people. I saw your potential and what you were capable of before you even saw it. So that's really sweet. And then one of my fellow cast members invited me to a different group, another local theater, Main Street Theater, which we talked about when we were together at the Pride Festival here in Rock Hill. And so that got me connected to Main Street Theater, where I work with local writers and actors, and we produce plays that are kind of written in-house and we workshop them together. And it sounds almost too good to be true, but I almost didn't even go that first night because I was so nervous right after my experiences with groups of people. It was like, oh my gosh, am I going to go to another group and what's going to happen here? But took some deep breaths, got over that imposter syndrome in a way, or like invited it in and then just was like, okay, now let's go anyway. Let's do it anyway. So over the past couple of years, I've just really tried to open myself up again to new people. And to this, I've written more plays than I can count with the group. I've acted. I've been in I've had some of my own plays produced. And then that I produced my first set of shows and directed a show. So quite the journey. Leaving evangelicalism, it's like my story post religion, even in a way, is full of all these risks and taking one leading to another. And even when things don't go the way that I wanted them to go, I don't look at the rejection, quote unquote, or the failure in the same way anymore. I'm like, they are survivable. I will get through it. And what am I going to learn? I see these as valuable teachers for me. And, I'm not currently recording podcasts for Broadening the Narrative, but listeners can check that out. I also did another podcast. So You Think You Can Date, when I started dating for the first time in 15 years as a queer, poly, millennial mom. And it's fun, full of lots of adventures. I'm currently not dating, everything's closed down for the moment. But anyways, I guess the too long didn't read or didn't listen would be that I'm a writer, an author, a podcaster, an actor, but I'm really trying to lean more into more than all those things. I am, let me get this right, a human being learning to, quote, relax toward the things that feel possible. That's what my co-star astrology app told me. And so I'm like, if I just get one shot at this, I want to do everything that makes me come alive. I want to tell my story and I want to make an impact here. And that idea of coming alive comes from the popular Howard Thurman quote, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. There we go.
I love that. And I can definitely tell, you said you were forever the optimist and star of the show. And I definitely get that from your big, bubbly personality. And my next question is, why do you focus on topics such as deconstruction through your writing? But also, you mentioned something earlier about the reason why you left the church, and I'm about to deviate from my questions a bit. But can you talk about what spiritual abuse is and how that affected you at your core, about your big bubbly personality, and how that spiritual abuse led to the deconstruction? And you don't have to go into detail about how you were abused, but just talking general about what are some signs that people may find in their own lives that they may be spiritually abused.
That's such a good question. I would say any system that sets up a power dynamic that's rooted in a hierarchy. And that is what was happening, where you have a central figure, in this case, a quote, lead pastor, who doesn't have accountability. I am not anti-churches. I'm currently identifying as an atheist, but I'm like, hey, whatever helps people put more love in the world, go put more love in the world. I don't care what it is. If you're putting love in the world, I'm all for it. But in my case, especially if you look at how I was 19 when I started going to this particular church. So I would say some signs to look for is who's attracted to the system, right? Like if it's a church, who's going there? We really focused on college students in the beginning. And you think about that being a really vulnerable demographic because these kids are out on their own for the first time. And so I won't go more into it than that. But, if you have someone who, and I want to give the benefit of the doubt in a way, this person really believed that the message he has to say is the message people need to hear. I believe that he fully believes that. But then if you isolate yourself and you keep yourself from being able to take any sort of feedback from others, then again, you are setting yourself up for a really unhealthy dynamic. And Diane Langberg, she said something to the effect of, it is always the responsibility of the pastor slash shepherd to repair the relationship, always. And so if you have a pastor who can't even acknowledge there's a problem, then you have a pastor who's never going to repair the relationship. And as I mentioned earlier, I really lost trust in myself. So it's another thing, like the isolating nature of you just do so much with this group of people and they become your family. But again, examine, what does family mean? Right. And if family is rooted in some of the things that I heard, for example, were we need more volunteers in the kids area. We always need more volunteers in the kids area. And we just need bodies to do that, even if you don't want to, even if it's not what you feel called to. I don't like taking out the trash, but sometimes in a family, you just do things you don't want to do. Now, again, just kind of examine who is being led to believe that they need to be doing things they don't want to be doing. Is the pastor doing things he doesn't want to be doing? Or is he absolved from that? And Taylor, this is going to be a tiny bit of an aside, but I've been learning more about my own brain and realizing that I am neurodivergent in some way. And I've been reading this book, Unmasking Autism, and rigid beliefs and a belief system, like people, like autistic people can be attracted to that because it gives you a certain set of rules to follow and all of that. But also you think about different personality types and your own background, if you're a people pleaser or all these things. And then my brain can't, I'm struggling to keep up with all the things I want to say, but it's a situation that's ripe for abuse when you have vulnerable people, college students, women, who are being told your sole purpose. Really examine what the theology is being taught too. Like I was being told that Eve was created to be Adam's helper. And the best way, this was from the mouth of the pastor, the best way my wife helps me is by bearing our children. And so when you're reduced to this assembly line for producing progeny, right? It really causes you to question. You don't have any identity for yourself outside of what you've been told the message from the church is. And so I would say I focus so much on deconstruction, or I am going to be moving away from that. But I did it was such a big part. Evangelical Christianity was such a big part of my life for so long. It impacted my whole personality, identity, really trying to fit this mold of what they wanted me to be led to me being a shell of who I once was. Because you talk about like the bubbliness, that's kind of who I was before the church. And then the church really beat me down in a lot of ways, caused me to doubt and question myself. And so I know so many other people are in that right now. They're on the cusp of being able to get free. And so I think about all these people I love and know have been impacted in some way. And I'm still healing from the damage, not only of being on the receiving end of it, but you can't come out of it unscathed, believing those things and perpetuating them too. So I need to take responsibility and accountability for, hey, I taught these damaging beliefs too. And now I want to repair the harm I've caused. So through my writing, I want to be transparent too about the highs and the lows of deconstruction. Because I think a common misconception could be, or something that gets kind of thrown back at people who are deconstructing, is if you're experiencing struggles, then it's like you shouldn't have left the church. But it's like, no, and there's highs too. And again, I go back to I'd rather be alone out here in a way and free than with these people who were like, this is God's good design for you. And so I would just say, to the extent that someone is curious and willing to engage with my writing, whether that be like a Substack post or a book, like purchasing a book, I want my writing to help heal them. Like, they might not engage in conversation with me about it. They might not be ready for that, but they might do these other things. Like I said, purchase a book, read a post, and that can have ripple effects for their healing. Because, yeah, I see all the damage that has been done by the teaching to myself and to people I love. And I don't know if I said enough about spiritual abuse, but I could talk, at length more about it, but I'll stop there for now. So, yeah.
No, that was great, and I love those warning signs, and I taught the signs of you might be in a abusive relationships for a really long time in my other life, and a lot of that tracks about just abuse in general, the power dynamics, using pattern behavior to enact power and control over someone, and that can definitely happen within a church context. And so I love how you use your writing to heal your own stories, but also inspire other people to like be curious about their own journey through your story. And so I would love to hear more about your journey as a self-published writer. What's that been like? And what keeps you grounded in your work as an author?
Such good questions. I'm gonna unblur my background because I'll show. Oh, don't look behind me though. I shouldn't have unblurred it. It's fine. This is real life. I'm in this messy closet. So my first book is over here. Is As for Mary's Family, Leaving the Toxic Religion I Was Groomed For. So the church that I was just talking about, and that pastor, that was the impetus for this book. And about 7 years prior to releasing it, I had written like an early draft, and it obviously went through so many changes because I went through so many changes. And yeah, so in the book, I really do explore toxic religion and all that stuff we were just talking about. It's like all these ways that the church, well, I go back to my family of origin and the ways that I was groomed for toxic religion, because in my early story, the abuse I experienced there really set me up for accepting abuse in other forms. And I chronicle my journey to really finding my voice and a way out of that church, which began when I understood that all those things, the power dynamics, the narcissism, the spiritual abuse, the emotional detachment in the church were as familiar as family. So that's where that comes from. So I wrote the book. I met Kim Marsh, who founded the Open Book Company. And I just felt all this magic on our first Zoom call together with her and hired her to be my editor. And with her support, I also had a beta reader team to give me early feedback, and then a launch team when the book was getting ready to go out. And so that was me self-publishing the first book. And so, yeah, for anyone who is going a self-publishing route, I just think it's so good to have things like beta readers and or a launch team, because otherwise it can be a really isolating experience to be a writer, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be isolating. And I also joined the Open Book Company, and they have writing circles. So I would be on a call with other writers, and that felt like I was connected to community as I wrote. The next year, I self-published my second memoir, so Becoming Egalitarian: Our Journey from Hierarchy Toward Mutuality, and it features contributions from my then partner, Stephen. So we got married when I was 20 and a part of the kind of culty church. And Becoming Egalitarian examines our relationship and how we operated from that male headship model, and then how we moved toward a more equitable partnership. And around that same time, I was also doing my poetry collection. So I've got Reflections from a Former Evangelical, and these were poems that I actually wrote in 2019 and then revisited and edited and worked on those. And then I was like, now let's do more reflections. So reflections and more reflections from a former evangelical. It's like, I'm not reinventing the wheel here. We're just going to keep it going. And then my latest book that came out is Coming of Age and Coming Out: Stories of Repressed and Reclaimed Sexual Desire. And it's my final memoir, closing out this trilogy of memoirs. And it's a collection of stories that start in my childhood and go through my adolescence and culminate in coming out in my 30s as queer and non monogamous. And again, my coach and my editor, Kim Marsh, who I mentioned earlier, who founded the Open Book Company, she says we write to understand. And she got that from someone else, And it's that idea of by writing, I have grown to understand myself and my life and why I do what I do so much better. And, I would say I've been writing what I know, but I've also been writing what I want to know more about in relation to how I show up in the world and how I want to show up. And you asked what keeps me grounded. And I would say two big things: slowing down and being outside. So to go back to like spiritual abuse, let me say that a hustle culture and one that is all about what do you come do and that glorifies just work, work, work for the Lord and you burn out, that is spiritual abuse. When you are being treated as a commodity or as like a cog in a machine and your personhood is being stripped away, you're being objectified and you're being expected to operate in a way that's almost like a god, which I heard someone else define narcissism as trying to live without limits. And so I liked that a lot. So no, I am not a demigod. I don't have endless whatever. So I slow down and I try to get outside. So a few months after leaving the church I referenced before, we started going to this other church and they invited a therapist to come in and speak on a Sunday morning. So it was really beautiful. And she delivered this message about the need for rest as well as the restorative nature of water. She talked about water a lot. And so I decided like I'm going to slow way down in my life. And that has gone and rippled into every area of my life. Like, how much can I just try to slow down? And that has actually benefited me creatively. So I started going to a local lake at that time on Wednesdays, and I would just look at the water. I would just sit there and watch the fish and watch the birds and do absolutely nothing. Okay. And that just simply sitting at the water improved my whole mindset. And I also started daily breathing and meditation and journaling. And so, some people might be like, okay, but like, what does that have to do with writing or creating art? And I understand, and I can only speak for myself. But for me personally, I can say that all of those things help me show up to the page and write and be more creative from a place that is peaceful, that is gentle with myself, that is mindful, and that is grounded. And sure, it's like I can crank out material when I'm stressed out, when I'm harsh with myself, when I'm scattered, when I feel untethered. It's like, why would I keep doing that? I don't want to do that anymore. It's like, I've tried that method. I don't want to do that anymore. Been there, done that. And so even though this dominant culture around us may suggest that, hey, this approach is lazy, right? It's like that hasn't been my experience. And I wish I knew who to give credit to for this, but I read somewhere, I'm going to read it. We waste years because we won't waste hours. We waste years because we won't waste hours. And in the wasting of hours, I came to realize none of it is ever actually wasted. Okay. And instead of viewing all those things that I do for my grounding, instead of viewing those as a waste of time, I'm like, oh no, they are absolutely essential for having a successful and productive writing time. But also, success and productivity are experienced differently when I come to my writing with this grounded mindset versus like a hurried mindset. And I want to also say the last piece. I like the material that I create and I like the person I am while creating it. when I have that gentleness towards myself and when I'm operating from that, right? I'm more authentic about what I'm writing. I'm more aligned with who I am and who I want to be. And so, in place of that hustling, it's like I'm healing, I'm showing up for myself, I'm being faithful in all that I do, even if it doesn't result in a book deal or accolades or wealth. But I'll also say your girl is super not opposed to those outcomes. So, I don't have to have those things, but I'm also like, I would like those things. I would like the book deal and the accolades and to make money off my writing. So both and.
No, I definitely feel that. And I love what you said about just liking who you are when you show up to the page, when you're gentle with yourself. Cause I am in this place where I'm just like, what do you mean I'm laying in bed till 8 a.m.? I used to wake up at 5:45 in the morning, go to the gym, be to work by 8. Why can't I have some of this energy? And I'm just trying to be okay with slowing down. And a lot of my work has gotten a lot better now that I'm just adding a lot of ease into my life. So
Yeah.
I love that approach and how it just like it's quality over the amount of time you're spending grinding.
Yeah.
So you
Yep.
don't wanna come from a place of being ground down. You wanna be earthquake grounded, but
Yeah.
not grinded from the grind.
Yeah.
So diametrically opposed to everything we just talked about. What are your some of your upcoming projects?
Yes. Okay. So my last poetry book will be aptly titled Final Reflections from a Former Evangelical. I know. So creative over here. And it'll come out soon and sort of close out that trilogy of poetry. I'm also currently trying to get an agent. So to the point of like, I'd like to get a book deal for my latest work that I've been writing, and it's called Practicing Presence Healing Trauma with the Magic Mushroom. And so I'm working on writing those first 10 pages because a lot of agents now are asking for the first 10 pages. So I just want to say, I'm going to practice giving my little spiel that practicing presence is for the over 14 million US adults who have had at least one major depressive episode with severe impairment, according to the National Institute of Mental Health. Right. And so, like me, those people may have already tried therapy or something else. Now, I've never been on an SRI, but maybe they've been on a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. I had to do all this research for what these things actually mean, so I'm going to talk about them. And so people are desperate for a solution, right? And so I, through this book, want to uncover what plant medicine could be able to offer people and practicing presence. I don't know. I'm in love with this book. It's broken up by categories where I explore my relationship first to nature. Like if you imagine a set of concentric circles. So starting with nature, then we move into activism and advocacy, family and friends, food and exercise, sex and intimacy, and then myself. And each of those is where I outline what my relationship was like before the psilocybin and after the psilocybin. The book is not medical advice, and I will go on record saying that, these are still Schedule 1 drugs, which is bananas, but this is the world we live in. And so by sharing my personal stories, I hope to remove some of that stigma that has come from the war on drugs, quote unquote, war on drugs propaganda and encourage others to get curious about a modality that they may have previously overlooked for their healing. I don't believe psychedelics to be this cure all, like external panacea if people have been neglecting their inner work, but I have experienced the power of them when paired with that deep inner work to bring me the healing that I've needed. And I will just say, like, I put in years of preparation through therapy, through research, setting my intentions about it before going to the medicine to prepare me to partake with the medicine and then to write the book that I am writing about that journey to heal my trauma with the magic mushroom. And my last little thing is I recently went to Iceland for a writing workshop and spent almost a week in Iceland, which was just so good. Like, take me back to Iceland. And so I'm working on some fiction manuscripts from that, but those are still in very early development. So,
That is amazing because I feel like well, first of all, the war on drugs was very racist and classist and has origins in that. And just thinking about natural alternatives, but also the reason why there's such a stigma against drugs is because people use them to disconnect. So I love how you are talking about how to use them as a tool to connect to yourself instead of like disconnecting and running away from that inner work. So I'm so excited for this book and I think you're an agent for it. My
Me
fingers are
too.
crossed for it.
Thank you.
So all great writers are avid readers.
Mhm.
So has there been, I know you mentioned one book, has there been anything else that you've been reading lately that's left an impact on you?
Yeah, I just finished Braiding Sweetgrass, the very well-known book by Robin Wall Kimmerer, and I took away so much wisdom that is still changing me and my relationship to plants, to trees, to nature, right? So I'd heard so many people talk about it for so long and how much that book changed their lives. And then over the past, oh gosh, I don't even know how long now, but since my deconstruction journey started, I've been influenced by indigenous teachings and wisdom, which I had at one point, because of the indoctrination of white supremacy and white evangelicalism, I had discounted those teachings. Now I see them as like vital to our healing. And so, yeah, healing my relationship to the land through the things I've been learning. And so, while working on my book proposal and writing those first 10 pages of my book, I was like, let me read Braiding Sweetgrass. And it was just so fitting to be reading that while thinking about what was my relationship like before psilocybin to the land and what has it been like since. And yeah, I'm currently reading Unmasking Autism, Discovering the New Faces of Neurodiversity, which is by Devin Price. Because yeah, I've been wondering for a few years now, like, am I autistic? And yeah, and just seeing the ways that society makes it really difficult for an adult to get a diagnosis. And so a lot of adults end up self-diagnosing. And so I have been, yeah, for the past couple of years, really revisiting a lot of stories from my childhood and even seeing the ways that I maybe, like, if I am autistic, the idea of putting on this mask is saying, I don't want to be seen as lazy. So I'm going to overcompensate, because it's like all these negative things you associate with someone who's autistic. And if you started to see those traits in yourself or see how people responded to those, trying to overcompensate for them by showing up in the world in these ways and doing these things, but how that leads to burnout and how really it's not sustainable for anyone. So there's that.
Definitely. And I feel like the rise in TikTok has been influential in that because it's just sharing their everyday experiences. I follow, oh, I can't remember the name of the page. I'll link it in the show notes. But Savvy, he is this Black autistic man and he just talks about how like he just unmasked and, like, you could just see the joy on his face, just him being himself, and, like, first video I saw from him, just seeing, like, him talk about unmasking, like, because I always feel such immense joy seeing people be who they really are and not have to wear a mask, and I feel like, what would the state of the world be if people didn't feel like they had to mask and they could just be themselves and how much joy and love could be in the world, even from those who use power and control to control other people. How much could we all benefit if everybody felt the need just to be themselves and didn't feel the need to control everybody? So I love that so much. And so my last question is, what advice would you offer listeners who want to make a positive impact in their communities?
So obviously, this applies to more than just dating, but something I went into dating with was I will be who I am and you be who you are, and we can just be who we are together. Like that was one of my guiding principles is just be who we are and that authentic living. One of the biggest ways that I think you can make a positive impact on your community, and like you were saying, the world, but if we're starting with like what we can just tactically and just be there with is just live authentically and tell your story, and I would say people don't have to do it on a podcast. They don't have to write a book. They don't have to do it in this big public way, but there is power in naming what we've experienced with people who have earned our trust and who we feel safe with. And if you can be authentic with them about your experience. And I think when we are open and gentle with ourselves and non-judgmental with ourselves and our own stories and can hold a lot of space for that, it gives other people permission to extend openness to themselves, to be gentle with themselves and to not be judgmental about their own stories. Because where shame is, because some people be like, no, I think some people need to be shamed. But I think just without any extra caveats around it, just saying, I think that what we put into the world, and if we are aligned, then that can help other people put that into the world. And I think that as we are more tender with ourselves, we are going to naturally be more tender with one another. And I think that that will make an impact in our communities if people feel safe and secure. Like that's what I want. I want people to feel safe and secure with me, that and that I have earned their trust, and that even if I do have to push back on something that they've said or done, they're going to know it comes from a place of love, and vice versa out here trying to, like, obviously it's not just a blanket statement of just be gentle and there's no accountability. So, yeah.
Yes, I definitely feel that because one of the things in the sexual assault and domestic violence support world is talking about transformative justice and accountability and how that punitive nature of just incarceration doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help people want to take accountability because at our core, we don't want to be rejected or seen as monsters. So if we change the way about how we talk about harm and accountability and allow people to be tender and actually want to repair relationships and not be seen as a monster or rejected, just have some of that tenderness. Again, where would the world be? This was such a great conversation. I had so much fun, as
I did too.
always, when I'm around Nikki. So, where can people keep up with you and your work and connect?
But that connects back to systems like the toxic stuff, right? Like we have the kind of penal retribution, punitive system we have, and you trace that back to the dominant religion being rooted in one of retribution and punishment that isn't restorative. Even though, again, I'm an atheist, but I understand that the Bible at its core has a message of restoration. And so it's like, but where are the people who hold power choosing to put their stake in the ground and to, yeah, build a system off of? And so that tells you a lot right there. Okay. So where can people find me? I'm on Instagram mostly at Broadening the Narrative. So that was my podcast before, Broadening the Narrative. And I do have a website, nickipappas.com, and people can subscribe to my website and get fun emails from me. I think they're fun. And then I have a Substack, which is called Coming Alive, where I write about pursuing all that makes us come alive, per that Howard Thurman quote that I shared at the beginning of the call. So yeah. Yeah.
I will be sure to link all of those places in the show notes and all of the books that we talked about as well as all of Nikki's books and where to get them, which by the way, you can also get them at liberationislit.com. So yes, thank you for being a part of the podcast. And thank you, listeners. If you have any stories you want to share, want to suggest any topics, or just want to connect, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Liberation is Lit, or you can visit our website, liberationislit.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review. And remember, your voice matters. And together, through the lens of stories, we're going to make a difference in the world. Until next time.